Good evening, America. This is Jeff Desk, where we dive straight into the stories shaping our nation without the spin. Today, we're unpacking a whirlwind of political drama that's got everyone talking. From high-stakes hearings to absurd lawsuits that scream retaliation, picture this. A top official grilled relentlessly in front of Congress, all while her own department rolls out yet another eyebrow-raising legal move straight from the top. Pam Bondi faces intense criticism during Capitol Hill questioning while her Department of Justice pursues another Trump-driven lawsuit. Pam Bondi, serving as Attorney General, recently found herself under significant pressure during a hearing on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers directed pointed and sustained questions toward her, challenging various aspects of her leadership and the decisions coming out of the Justice Department. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as members of Congress pressed for explanations on policies, priorities, and specific actions that appeared to align more closely with political interests than with impartial enforcement of the law. Bondi responded with measured statements, attempting to frame the department's work as routine and necessary, but the scrutiny did not let up easily. Critics highlighted what they saw as inconsistencies between her public assurances of independence and the visible influence of external pressures on departmental operations. At the very same time this hearing unfolded, the Department of Justice moved forward with initiating yet another legal filing that many observers quickly characterized as lacking strong merit. This particular lawsuit carried clear indications of originating from directives tied directly to Donald Trump. The motivation behind it seemed less about addressing a genuine legal wrong and more about responding to personal grievances or perceived slights. Legal analysts reviewing the filing noted that it relied on arguments that had previously struggled in similar contexts, raising immediate questions about its viability in front of a judge. The timing of the announcement, coinciding precisely with Bondi's difficult session before Congress, amplified perceptions that the department was being positioned as an instrument to advance individual agendas rather than broader public interests. This development fits into a recognizable pattern where high-profile legal actions emerge during moments of political vulnerability for administration figures. When Bondi encountered sharp rebukes and demands for accountability on the Hill, the parallel launch of this case suggested an effort to shift attention or project strength elsewhere. Observers pointed out that such moves often serve a dual purpose, demonstrating loyalty to the executive while attempting to place opponents on the defensive through prolonged litigation, even if the cases ultimately face dismissal. The criticism directed at Bondi during the hearing focused heavily on whether the department maintained proper boundaries between executive desires and prosecutorial discretion. Several lawmakers emphasized that the role of the Attorney General demands safeguarding institutional integrity above all else, yet the simultaneous pursuit of this lawsuit appeared to undermine that principle in the eyes of many. Public commentary surrounding the hearing underscored the intensity of the exchanges. Questions ranged from procedural matters to broader philosophical debates about the proper use of federal authority. Bondi maintained composure throughout much of the session, offering prepared responses that reiterated commitment to the rule of law and the administration's stated goals. However, the repeated challenges exposed underlying tensions about perceived partisanship within the department. As the hearing progressed, it became evident that the criticism was not merely performative. It reflected genuine concerns held across party lines about the direction of federal law enforcement under current leadership. Meanwhile, the lawsuit itself drew swift reactions from legal experts and media outlets alike. Commentators described it as another instance of resource expenditure on matters unlikely to produce meaningful outcomes. The filing process, including the drafting of complaints and supporting materials, requires considerable effort from career attorneys and support staff. Directing those resources toward a case viewed as politically motivated inevitably prompts questions about opportunity costs. What other investigations or enforcement priorities might receive less attention as a result? This aspect fueled much of the criticism leveled at Bondi, as lawmakers argued that leadership should prioritize cases with clear public benefit over those driven by personal or partisan considerations. The intersection of these two events, the intense congressional examination of Bondi and the rollout of the new legal action, created a powerful narrative for those tracking the dynamics within the current administration. It illustrated how moments of institutional stress can coincide with proactive legal maneuvers intended to assert control or retaliate against critics. Whether intentional or coincidental, the timing reinforced existing arguments that the Department of Justice operates with less insulation from White House influence than tradition and precedent would dictate. Throughout the hearing, Bondi faced demands to clarify lines of authority and decision-making processes. Yet the emerging lawsuit provided tangible evidence that those lines may have blurred considerably. The new legal action stems from Donald Trump's sensitivity to criticism and desire for retaliation. At the heart of this latest Department of Justice initiative lies a familiar motivation: Donald Trump's well-documented reaction to any form of criticism that he perceives as unfair or damaging to his image. Over time, a consistent pattern has emerged where public statements, media coverage, or legal challenges directed at him trigger swift counter-responses, often in the form of lawsuits or official investigations. This particular case follows that same trajectory, appearing less as a response to a concrete violation of law and more as an effort to address what Trump views as personal affronts. Trump has repeatedly expressed frustration when individuals or entities challenge him openly, whether through journalism, political opposition, or courtroom proceedings. In his own words during various interviews and public appearances, he has described such opponents as dishonest, corrupt, or motivated by bias, and he has advocated for holding them accountable through every available mechanism. This rhetoric frequently translates into action, as seen in the initiation of civil suits, defamation claims, or requests for official probes. The current legal filing aligns closely with that approach, emerging in the wake of recent commentary or developments that he found objectionable. The desire for retaliation plays a central role here. Rather than allowing criticism to pass without response, the strategy involves deploying legal resources to place the source of that criticism under pressure. This can involve lengthy court processes, public disclosures during discovery, or simply the reputational burden of being named in federal litigation. Even when such cases fail to advance far, due to jurisdictional issues, lack of standing, or failure to state a viable claim, the act of filing itself serves as a signal. Dissent carries consequences. Observers note that this tactic aims not only at the immediate target, but also at creating a chilling effect on others who might consider similar criticism in the future. Legal scholars examining these patterns point out that sensitivity to critique often correlates with a broader view of loyalty and authority. When Trump perceives an attack on his leadership or character, the response tends to escalate quickly beyond public rebuttals into formal legal channels. The Department of Justice becomes involved when the matter can be framed within federal jurisdiction, allowing the full weight of government authority to bear on the situation. Critics argue this represents a misuse of institutional power, transforming what should remain a neutral enforcer of law into an extension of personal grievance resolution. In this instance, the specifics of what prompted the sensitivity remain tied to recent public discourse or events that drew negative attention toward Trump or his associates. The lawsuit's language and timing suggest it seeks to reframe those events in a manner more favorable to him while imposing costs, financial, temporal, and emotional, on those seen as responsible. This approach has become a recurring feature of his post-presidency strategy, where litigation serves both defensive and offensive purposes. It defends his narrative by challenging opposing accounts directly in court, and it offends by forcing adversaries to engage in prolonged legal battles. The pursuit of such actions carries implications for public trust in institutions. When federal agencies appear to act primarily in service of individual sensitivities rather than impartial standards, confidence in their objectivity erodes. Legal professionals and former officials have voiced concerns that repeated use of this tactic risks normalizing the idea that criticism of powerful figures warrants official retaliation. Yet the pattern persists, driven by the belief that aggressive legal engagement ultimately deters future challenges and reinforces dominance in public debates. This latest move exemplifies how personal temperament shapes institutional behavior. Trump's documented aversion to perceived slights fuels a cycle where disagreement prompts not dialogue or debate, but escalation through the courts. The result is a steady stream of filings that consume resources, occupy judicial dockets, and keep controversies alive long after the initial criticism has faded from headlines. Whether this strategy achieves its intended goals remains debated, but its persistence underscores a core element of his approach to conflict. Meet opposition, not with restraint, but with counterforce amplified by official authority. Reference to Janet Jackson's Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction as a past event that caused massive public outrage. Janet Jackson's halftime performance at the Super Bowl became infamous due to a brief wardrobe exposure during the show with Justin Timberlake. The incident sparked immediate and widespread shock across television audiences. Complaints flooded in from viewers who felt it crossed acceptable boundaries for family viewing. Media coverage exploded overnight, turning the moment into one of the most discussed controversies in entertainment history. The Federal Communications Commission received thousands of formal complaints, leading to investigations and fines against the network. Parents expressed outrage, claiming the event traumatized children who watched expecting wholesome entertainment. Lawsuits followed from individuals and advocacy groups arguing for stricter broadcast standards. Public discourse framed it as a cultural turning point, with many calling it excessive and inappropriate. The backlash lingered for years, influencing future halftime show planning and content guidelines. Networks became far more cautious about live performances to avoid similar fallout. The event remains a benchmark for how quickly a minor on-stage mishap can ignite national debate and regulatory scrutiny. Trump frequently files lawsuits when personally offended, but many similar previous cases have been dismissed in court. Donald Trump has a long history of turning to litigation whenever he feels personally attacked or criticized. He initiates lawsuits against media outlets, political figures, former associates, and others who challenge his statements or actions. These cases often center on defamation, libel, or perceived slights to his reputation. Trump describes such legal moves as necessary to hold dishonest people accountable and to defend his name. In practice, however, a significant number of these efforts end up dismissed early in the process. Judges frequently rule that the claims lack sufficient evidence, fail to meet legal thresholds, or fall outside jurisdictional bounds. Courts have tossed out suits against prosecutors, investigators, and critics, citing issues like immunity protections or failure to prove malice. Groups tracking these matters note that while some cases settle quietly, many others reach dismissal stages without advancing far. This pattern shows a reliance on filing suits as a response tool, even when prospects for success appear limited from the start. The repeated dismissals highlight challenges in substantiating broad allegations of wrongdoing or corruption in formal legal settings. Deputy AG Todd Blanche defends DOJ actions on TV, insisting staff must follow the president's priorities. Todd Blanche, serving as Deputy Attorney General under Pam Bondi, appeared on a major television network for an interview that quickly turned challenging. George Stephanopoulos pressed him directly on whether the Department of Justice had become politicized under the current administration. Blanche firmly denied any improper weaponization, instead pointing the finger at previous leadership and insisting the department operates appropriately. He emphasized that career prosecutors and staff in the DOJ are required to carry out the priorities set by the sitting president. Blanche explained this as a standard expectation for anyone working in an executive branch agency where alignment with administration goals forms part of the job. He maintained that decisions reflect lawful directives rather than personal agendas, framing obedience to presidential objectives as essential to the department's function. Throughout the exchange, Blanche stayed composed, repeating his position that the current approach differs from what critics claim and that staff simply execute assigned policies. Blanche repeatedly calls critics crooked as hell, while denying the DOJ is being weaponized. In the same interview, Todd Blanche used strong language to describe those he views as opponents of the administration's efforts. He described certain prosecutors, investigators, and political figures as crooked as hell, repeating the phrase multiple times to underscore his belief in their dishonesty and bias. Blanche argued that these individuals pursued cases without sufficient grounds, leading to dismissals when reviewed by judges. He rejected accusations that the DOJ now acts as a political weapon, countering that any aggressive actions stem from legitimate efforts to address wrongdoing. When Stephanopoulos questioned the meaning behind claims that people were coming after others, Blanche clarified that career attorneys had refused to bring certain charges in the past, resulting in dropped cases. He stood by his view that those responsible lack integrity and that the department's current direction corrects previous overreach. The repeated use of such blunt terms highlighted his frustration and served to delegitimize critics in the public eye while defending the administration's legal strategy. Senator Mark Kelly warns that Trump and allies aim to silence dissent and intimidate Americans from speaking out. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, a former astronaut and Navy veteran who defeated a Trump-backed candidate, has spoken out strongly about the broader implications of these legal efforts. In public statements and interviews, he described the situation as deeply concerning, rather than any kind of victory or progress. Kelly argued that Donald Trump, along with his close associates, are actively working to undermine core democratic institutions. Their goal, he said, centers on suppressing voices that criticize them through lawful channels. By pursuing aggressive lawsuits and investigations, they create an environment where ordinary citizens hesitate before expressing disagreement. Kelly emphasized that this pattern sends a clear warning. Speak against powerful figures, and you risk becoming the next target in a prolonged legal battle. He pointed to the chilling effect this has on free speech, noting that Americans should feel secure exercising their rights without fear of retaliation from government resources. Kelly framed these actions as an attempt to break the system itself, prioritizing personal or political loyalty over open debate and accountability. His comments highlight how such tactics erode public trust and discourage civic participation. House Republicans, led by Representative Mark Alford, propose investigating Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime show, calling it worse than Janet Jackson's incident. Representative Mark Alford, a Republican from Missouri, appeared on a conservative media outlet to discuss growing frustration among some GOP members over the recent Super Bowl halftime performance featuring Bad Bunny. Alford announced that House Republicans have already begun looking into the show, claiming its content crossed serious lines. He compared it unfavorably to the 2004 Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction, insisting that what occurred during Bad Bunny's set was far more disturbing and objectionable. Alford specifically referenced lyrics from the performance, describing them as highly inappropriate based on excerpts that had circulated. He suggested the inclusion of Spanish language elements and diverse performers fueled conservative anger, portraying the NFL's decision to feature the artist as unpatriotic or divisive. The proposal for a congressional probe aimed to examine whether the halftime entertainment violated any standards or warranted further scrutiny from lawmakers. Alford's statements reflected a push to frame cultural events as matters of national concern, extending political oversight into entertainment choices. This move drew immediate attention as an example of how partisan divides now extend to pop culture moments like major sports broadcasts. Morning Joe panel laughs off the idea, labels the outrage as racist, performative, and a distraction from real issues. The Morning Joe panel reacted with visible amusement and disbelief when discussing Representative Mark Alford's comments about investigating Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime show. Co-hosts and contributors laughed openly at the notion of Congress spending time on a pop performance. They described the conservative push as rooted in racism, pointing to discomfort with Spanish lyrics and non-white performers dominating the stage. Panelists called the outrage largely performative, designed more for political points than genuine concern. Willie Geist noted the absence of any confirmed congressional probe, joking that constituents elected representatives for serious legislative work, not cultural policing. Joe Scarborough sarcastically asked if the alternative was Kid Rock, whose own lyrics have drawn criticism for problematic themes. Contributor Mike Barnacle added that halftime shows should reflect America's diversity, not just serve a narrow audience. The group emphasized that such reactions distract from pressing national priorities like policy and governance. They portrayed the criticism as small-minded and outdated, highlighting how it reveals deeper biases rather than legitimate grievances over entertainment content. Script highlights hypocrisy, criticism of Bad Bunny while ignoring controversial lyrics from Kid Rock at the alternative MAGA event, calling it a clear waste of taxpayer money. The script draws sharp attention to evident double standards in the backlash against Bad Bunny's performance. While some conservatives condemned his lyrics and stage presence as inappropriate or un-American, they promoted an alternative event featuring Kid Rock, whose catalog includes songs with explicit references to sensitive and potentially illegal topics involving minors. The contrast underscores hypocrisy, as the same groups overlook or defend content from their preferred figures while attacking others. This selective scrutiny fuels arguments that the outrage stems more from cultural or racial discomfort than consistent moral standards. The script labels the proposed investigation a misuse of public funds, arguing that taxpayer dollars should address real problems instead of probing a halftime show. It frames the entire episode as emblematic of misplaced priorities, where political energy goes towards symbolic cultural battles rather than substantive issues. The waste of resources becomes a central critique, portraying the effort as frivolous and self-defeating in the broader context of governance and accountability. In wrapping up this eye-opening dive, we've seen how Attorney General Pam Bondi's tough day on the Hill collided with a fresh DOJ lawsuit born from Donald Trump's quick trigger on criticism, echoing past flops like those dismissed against figures such as Tish James and Jim Comey. We revisited the chaos of Janet Jackson's Super Bowl mishap to draw parallels with today's overreactions, spotlighting Deputy AG Todd Blanche's TV defense, where he demanded staff toe the presidential line while branding critics as utterly corrupt. Senator Mark Kelly's stark warning rang true. This is about stifling free speech and scaring everyday Americans silent. Then there's the sheer absurdity of House Republicans, spearheaded by Reps. Mark Alford, pushing to probe Bad Bunny's halftime show as somehow worse than Jackson's incident, only for the Morning Joe crew to dismantle it as biased, fake outrage distracting from real work. And let's not forget the glaring double standard, slamming Bad Bunny's lyrics while turning a blind eye to Kid Rock's controversial ones at their own event, all at taxpayer expense. This isn't just politics. It's a pattern of thin-skinned power plays, wasting resources, and eroding trust in our systems. It demands we stay vigilant, question authority, and push for accountability in a democracy that belongs to all of us. This script highlights hypocrisy. Criticism of Bad Bunny while ignoring controversial lyrics from Kid Rock at the alternative MAGA event, calling it a clear waste of taxpayer money. If this breakdown hit home, hit that subscribe button for more unfiltered truths on Geoff Desk, your go-to for the stories that matter. Like, share, and drop a comment below. What's the most ridiculous political distraction you've seen lately? Stay informed, folks. This is Geoff Desk. Stay awake, America. We'll see you in the next one.